Hello and welcome to this video in which I'm building the Focke-Wulf FW-190 starter set in 1/72nd scale from Airfix. If you enjoy the video and find it useful, please remember to like it below, and while you're there, why not subscribe to my channel as well to see other builds and future projects as they're completed. The Focke-Wulf FW-190 was the brainchild of designer Kurt Tank. The prototype flew in June 1939, and when fitted with the BMW 801 radial engine, it proved to be an outstanding fighter, especially at low and medium levels. Its usual armament of 4 20mm cannon and 2 machine guns gave it a formidable punch. Mainly used in the fighter or ground attack roles, more than 23,800 were built, of which 28 still survive to this day. This starter set shows the most numerous version, the A8, and comes with glue, paints and a paintbrush. The kit is rated at skill level 1, so it should be easy enough for anyone to make. If you're new to model making, you might want to check out my top 10 tips video on my channel. The kit comes with 1 flying hour, which you can save as an Airfix club member towards a free kit, or you can donate it to Models for Heroes. You can find a link to this below. I'm making this kit just with the contents supplied and using a couple of general tools, so let's see what we get inside. We open the box at one end and can pour the contents out. There we go. Now the first thing to look at is this plastic bag. I'll just pull it open, and this contains all the parts for the kit. There are 3 plastic sprues, as we call them, of grey plastic for most of the aircraft. This first one has the upper wing and the components of the cockpit. The second one here has the fuselage and engines, and this last one has the lower wing, undercarriage and tailplanes. There is also a smaller bag which contains the clear parts, which are the windshield and the canopy. Then there is a bag containing a tube of polystyrene cement and 4 pots of paint, 3 greys and a black. We'll talk about these colours later. We also get a Humbrol No. 2 general purpose brush. Finally, in the box we have a sheet of water release decals to decorate the kit and the instruction booklet. Warnings and advice in various languages, then the actual drawn instructions. I've always found these to be pretty good and simple to follow. The first thing I suggest before you actually start building is to give the bigger parts especially a wash in a gentle detergent solution, say a few drops of washing up liquid in a cup. This removes any residue from the moulding process, and I find it makes the kit easier to paint if you're not going to prime it first. When you're taking parts off the sprue, try and do it quite cleanly. Use small side cutters or a sharp craft knife. Any small bit of the support remaining on the part can be sanded off. I use homemade sanding sticks, but you could use something like a nail file. You will also need to check the parts for excess plastic, known as flash. These bits need to be sanded down as well, but do double check with the instructions that what you're proposing to sand isn't actually supposed to be there. Do make sure your paints are mixed well before use. A toothpick or a cocktail stick is ideal. These paints are acrylics, so you can wash out your brushes in water. I find it easier to paint smaller things like this control column whilst they're still on the sprue. On to construction. I'm starting by fitting out the cockpit with the seat, and I'll add that control stick as well. The instrument panel has some decals to add detail. Once the decal is soaked in water, I use tweezers to hold the backing paper and a wet paintbrush to ease the decal into place. When the decals have dried, I can fit the control panel in place, pushing it firmly to seat correctly. Next is the structural cross member that helps support the front of the fuselage. Then I can add the cockpit assembly and fit the other side of the fuselage. I'll clamp and tape it all together until it's all dry. Onto the wings next, and first I need to drill holes in the tops of the wings for some fairings for the guns. A 0.8mm drill does the trick perfectly. I can then fit this small exhaust piece into the centre of the lower wing panel. With the basic fuselage set, there are two upper panels over the engine bays to fit. Make sure you check the fit before you use glue and sand down any problem areas. With the fuselage again drying, it's back to the wings, and there are these inserts that fit into the lower halves. Next I can add the barrels for the cannon into the upper halves. The outer barrels just sit in place. The inner ones have a notch that fits on a pin at the back of the undercarriage bay. With all these parts in place, I can fit the two halves of the wing assembly together. Then I can add the fairings we drilled holes for earlier and leave the wings to dry. You might want to clamp them up or use tape. Going back to the fuselage, and I'm adding the tail planes now. These slot in very securely, and I'm also going to add the rudder to the fin. There's an armoured headrest to add to the cockpit just behind the seat, and then this supporting piece too. With all of the interior painted, I can add the windshield. I use a bit of blue tack on a toothpick to position it. Now I use white PVA glue to hold transparencies in place. I use PVA as the fumes from the cement supplied can cause some hazing of the transparent parts, especially if you're a bit heavy-handed. If you are using the polystyrene cement, be very, very sparing with it. Once the whole canopy is secure, I can attach the fuselage to the wing assembly. Now to the engine, and there's a pin that gets pushed in from the back. Then this fan assembly goes on the front, and the whole thing goes on the front of the fuselage. Now I can place this bomb rack on the bottom of the fuselage. This will actually hold a fuel tank. I'm also going to start assembling the main undercarriage legs by attaching them to the gear doors. Do double check your part numbers so that the correct leg goes on the correct door. Now I'm painting the wheels whilst they're still on the sprue, and it's helpful that they're attached where they flatten out to give a weighted look, because this bit will get sanded down later. I'll also paint the tail wheel at this point. I'll assemble the two halves of the fuel tank now. And with this dry, I can put the bomb rack on the central mount and then fit the fuel tank on top. While all this is setting, I can paint the outside of the undercarriage leg doors in the pale grey used for the underside of the aircraft. Now this paint in my set was quite thin, so it will need 2 or 3 coats to cover properly. When that's dry, I can put the wheels on. Now the wheels have an oval slot in them that helps align them correctly. Now remember, the flat spot on the tyre goes towards the bottom. Now I'm painting the fuselage next, and I've noticed there's a disparity between the colour on the box and the one supplied. Now Humbrol 27 is a sea grey, suitable for this aircraft, but Humbrol 145 appears to be plainly too light. The number corresponds to what you get, medium grey, and matches the box art, but not the colours on the painting guide. Now there's been some confusion at Airfix somewhere along the line. Anyway, I'll complete the painting by following the numbers instead of the shades on the painting guide. You can see how 145 is almost as light as the underside colour, although a lot more blue-grey. I'll apply the paint in a few coats as one is not enough, and I can work the paint to minimise the appearance of brush strokes. Once the painting's done, I'm going to add some accents to the panel lines. Normally I use a special wash for this, but you can use the black that comes with the kit as long as you dilute it well with water. Very gently apply this dilute solution to the panel lines. You can wipe a bit of excess with your finger or a cotton bud maybe for a dirty appearance. Generally, the further away you're going to be viewing the kit from, the heavier the wash you can get away with. Next on are the decals on the wings and on the fuselage. Once these have been soaked in water, again I use these tweezers to hold the support paper and a wet brush to coax the decals into place. Don't worry if they start to split, treat them gently and they will line up perfectly when you're done. One really tricky decal is this spiral that goes on the spinner. Now I hold the spinner on a cocktail stick and pick the decal off the backing paper with my brush. Then it's a case of draping the decal onto the spinner as you slowly rotate it. Once it is on, you can do some fine tuning with gentle use of the brush. It's one of the more satisfying things to get right. Back to construction, and I'm adding the main gear legs to the wells in the wings. They sit fairly well, but do keep an eye on them when they first start to set, just in case they have started to lean one way or another. When they're dry, they can be braced by these actuators that connect at the back of the leg and into the wheel well. The tail wheel is altogether more cooperative and slots right into place. Now, having stuck the spinner to the propeller, I can stick the whole lot to the front of the engine. And the last piece I need to add is this step. This is extended when the wheels are down and it lets the pilot climb aboard. And so there it is. I think that if Airfix ever revisit this model as a starter set, as they did with the Spitfire, they will lose many of these separate fuselage and wing panels and have them all pre-moulded. It would make it a lot easier to build this kit. However, I still enjoyed it, and the FW-190 looks pretty much okay to me. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, then please do remember to like it below, and whilst you're there, subscribe to my channel to see the growing number of builds and future projects as they're completed. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.